So by the time you're watching this video, I already spent over 100 hours in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and likely will 100 more from here. The studio sent review codes a whole month in advance and I got to do everything. I finished the whole story, almost all the side content, and the majority of the achievements. It wasn't completely issues free, so today I'm going to review everything about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. As is the case with all the games I review on this channel, I always buy the games even if I do end up getting a review code, and more often than not also give away extra copies to my viewers. That being said, how does it feel jumping into early 15th century Bohemia during a time of so much war, lawlessness, and political turmoil? Well, I've gotta say, if anything, it feels very darn immersive. From the moment you jump in the saddle, pull down your visor, and charge into combat during the day, to boozing with your friends at the local tavern in the evening, all the way to hitting it off with the ladies at the local bathhouse at nightfall. This is but a small fraction of what makes up the entirety of what is Kingdom Come 2. The game puts a lot of accent on portraying not just a piece of Central European history, but also the feeling of living in those times in a way that even somebody with minimal knowledge of local history can enjoy. And along the way, there are heavy choices to be made. Do you plan on behaving like a knight, upholding the law above all else, and protecting those in need? Or do you see the opportunity of war to loot, pillage, and betray almost everybody you meet? And I feel that part of what gives the game its charm is the character design and voice acting. Henry and Lord Capon make an excellent duo that's funny when it needs to be, but quickly goes serious when the situation turns bad. Even though I still think Capon is an incessant, spoiled brat that I constantly wanted to sabotage in the beginning, but even he grows as a character over time. And the narrative facilitates a lot of character growth too. So you will see both Henry and most of the supporting cast going through their high and low points, through pain, despair, but also joy, and this shapes them as you go through these moments together, or separately, because as you will see, many of your decisions will have big impacts. But all in all, by the end of the story, all of these hard-to-remember names become more than just familiar faces, they become genuine friends that you want to spend as much time as possible with. And that's because the story both makes the time spent around them memorable, or it makes them grow as individuals over time. Usually it's a combination of both. So somebody with dubious motivations at the start of the story, or even an enemy for that matter, can turn into a veritable ally, showing a great sense of motivation and complexity. Equally intricate politics and strange allegiances can also result in great betrayals. Unfortunately, there is a low point here that I have to talk about, and while I found most of the characters here to be great, there was one occasion in particular that I felt was a bit forced. Like, there's this one moment later in the game where you've got to collect evidence to help somebody in a judicial trial. Otherwise, that person might risk getting sent to the gallows. Mind you, that person is indeed innocent, and if you uncover all the clues, you will find the real perp. Design-wise, the idea and build-up to that moment was great, but the whole thing fell apart in execution. And that is because the game almost doesn't allow you to pick the wrong outcome here whatsoever. You cannot botch the trial even if you consistently try to mess up, pick the wrong options, or interpret the clues wrong, to the point that the game itself almost breaks immersion by making the right choices way too evident and to steer you in the desired outcome. And yes, I know falsely accusing somebody sucks, but A, this is a video game, and B, I could literally falsely pin the same situation on a different NPC literally in the same mission, which got them killed. So I wouldn't mind if this was consistent in all of the previous essential NPC encounters, but it wasn't. And in this case, like I said, I really wanted to test the limits of how much I could botch a trial to the point of taking down an innocent person down, especially since, like I said, you can affect a great number of innocents, even raise entire villages and burn them to the ground in the process, even in side stories. But luckily, that was the only time I saw the game so hellbent in holding my hands, and if you follow the main story, there is a reason for why that happens. I just wished it was explained and portrayed a little bit better. And this brings us to choices and consequences. In a game that follows historical events more or less, how do choices factor in? Well, they actually matter more than you think, but not in a way that alters history. So you're not just going to barge in King Sigismund's council meeting and challenge him to a duel as Henry, for example, because that just simply never happened. Instead, gaps in history and micro-stories within the overarching narrative can have vastly different endings depending on your choice during them. That, and there is also the more immediate gameplay effect of certain choices providing much better rewards. So like I said before, and as you're going to see in future guide videos, making sure to complete extra optional objectives almost always give you some of the best rewards in the game. But besides that, having high charisma, speech, or intimidation levels can reveal crucial pieces of information via dialogues that can even open extra sections within those missions that might have otherwise been completely hidden to you up until then. Additionally, a lot of quests, including many of the side missions, can have good or bad endings, but also morally gray areas where the outcome's moral implication is left to the player's interpretation. Some of these choices can even have consequences that span over the whole game, such as decisions that result in certain characters living or dying, entire villages being destroyed or saved, and so on. There are deep introspective moments for Henry too, with long-lasting effects on the story, which is what makes your connection to those people or places feel authentic. Having his village razed and his biological parents murdered in the first game, does Henry let grief and revenge consume him and turn him into the very demons he vowed to destroy, or will he seek a path of redemption? That choice is entirely up to you. This is why I feel that replayability potential of Kingdom Come 2 is very high. I finished my first playthrough being somewhat of a pragmatic, so not too evil but not too good either. So even if I behaved like a knight during the day, during the night I was still robbing people blind or even torturing them when needed. Yes, you can totally do that in this game on more than just a few occasions, again, if you choose to. I'm foreseeing at least 2 more playthroughs where I'm planning to go with every possible wrong choice, and another one in which I'm going to sacrifice everything I can to be the good guy. That being said, let's move on to some other gameplay related stuff, including the RPG systems, which I found to be consistently one of Kingdom Come's 2 strongest points. Specifically, the loot system is highly detailed, perks and upgrades have a huge impact, and you genuinely feel the power growth as you progress with Henry, plus I really enjoyed the survival aspect. So in terms of the loot system, the game's loot is highly abundant and extremely useful. Like if you see an enemy with any gear piece on them, you can literally steal that from them. So even after ending up butt naked in the middle of Troskovitz, if you know what you're doing, you can end up adorned in high-level armor right away within the same day. Armor is also layered, which means you stack it on top of each other. Like take a blouse, put a chainmail on it, then armor, then neck protection, and maybe some extra army coat or whatever. Like most games have 3 or 4 armor categories altogether, while Kingdom Come 2 has 3 or 4 per body part. And it makes a huge difference too. Besides the passive stats to stab and slash protection, the more armor you have on, the more protected against attacks you will be physically. As in, if you're well protected, you can literally tank a few blows before the armor physically breaks and your real health gets damaged. There's no other game that made it so clear why physical armor was such a useful advantage in the Middle Ages than Kingdom Come. Sure, it comes at a cost, weight and speed get affected, but you level strength so much that you'll feel nimble still by mid to end game. However, it's not just high-grade metal armor that's useful. Literally every clothing piece has parameters that really matter. So noblemen and expensive clothing give you a massive boost to charisma, which means NPCs will literally treat you better, suspect you less of crimes, and you can even pass dialogue skill checks much easier because of them. Equally, darker colored clothing is insanely strong for sneaking and robbing. A full black attire will make you almost impossible to detect during the nighttime. Warhorse Studios manages to bring more than just passive stats to gear that raises arbitrary damage numbers. They literally make the gear affect actual gameplay in a realistic way. And that's before all the jewelry you can wear and all the time-accurate pieces you can find. Heck, it becomes a hassle to juggle all the available options that you will get, but that is actually a good problem to have. Equally, almost if not all the perk upgrades feel useful and impactful. They aren't just like arbitrary stat increases, they are very useful, be it for combat, speech, or crafting related activities. They give bonuses such as being able to handle weapons better, spurring your horse for insane speeds. Heck, even getting drunk can provide massive advantages if you get the right perks for that. And those are just the ones in the passive list. Besides all of that, you can learn master strikes and even combos for each weapon from masters you find in the open world with devastating effects in combat. A bit too devastating to the point that some of them feel indispensable to having a good time, like for example, I cannot imagine playing without master strikes after 100 hours, but maybe you're, different. Also, another drawback, if you want to call it like that, is that you end up being so strong in some aspects that it literally trivializes some parts of the game, even in the end game, such as stealth being the biggest example over here. Stealth, once you reach like 15 to level 20, you will sneak, rob, and steal more money than you know what to do with, and the best gear without having to spend a dime on. Literally, stealth is broken in this game, and that is not a joke. I also want to talk about survival mechanics. You have your sleep and nourishment levels, both which have to be maintained, so sleeping often and eating well is a balancing act for sure, and while sometimes it feels like it gets a bit in your way, the game offers more than one tool to further deal with all of it. So, for example, consuming potions such as the chamomile helps a ton with energy regeneration, while various foods like simple honey can give a lot of nourishment. But equally, overeating or going through extreme sleep deprivation can have serious effects on your health, stamina, and even if you stay conscious or not. Furthermore, wounds inflicted on various body parts will give different debuffs and even hinder various functionalities, such as breaking a leg making you unable to sprint, or getting hit in the head making energy regeneration suffer, and so on. On top of that, I also want to talk about the open world because this game looks downright gorgeous and easy to get lost into. Like, it's almost impossible to go from mission A to mission B and not be distracted by 5 other things on the way. Every village has its townfolk, every townfolk have their needs and problems, every road can get ambushed by bandits, and that's before factoring in all the treasure spots, Easter eggs, points of interest, and all the other mini games and side missions you can partake in. First map of Trotsky region is slightly smaller than that of the first game, but Gutenberg is way bigger and likely where you will spend like 60% of your time, especially if you're going for full completion. But specifically, the Gutenberg city is absolutely amazing. It's massive, the roads are filled with NPCs, and architecture that really makes it stand out. Of course, very historically detailed architecture, like the developers really put a lot of effort in recreating the actual physical structures. And that is before you even factor in the huge amount of NPCs, shopkeepers, interactivity over there. There's like criminals being sent to the pillory, and there's even like a whole series of interconnected underground tunnels that are pretty much missable if you're not paying attention, but they can lead to great treasures and even like make stealthing and robbing places so much easier. Now, in terms of performance and bugs, I will say that this game looks gorgeous and the performance was great on the PC. However, keep in mind that I'm also playing on a high-end 4090, so I mean, I was expecting that anyway, but I did not encounter frame drops, I did not encounter too many performance issues on the Steam version. However, I did encounter quite a few bugs, but a lot of them were fixed in a big patch a few days ago. So basically, I used to have quite a lot of crashes, but a big patch came in like 5 days ago and it basically fixed that. So I have not encountered any of those in like 30 or 40 hours since then. Besides that, there are still a few smaller issues still present. Like, for example, there's still this general jankiness and clunkiness, especially to combat. Sometimes the way characters or weapons connect with bodies, general animation mismatch here and there, and maybe occasional texture or light pop-ins can be a bit distracting, but they disappear after a few minutes, so they aren't always consistent, but when they trigger, it can be a bit jarring. One thing I haven't covered is mini-games. So like I said, I was able to open up a tournament, which is one of my favorite endgame activities. I take part in that pretty much every in-game week because it's worth it for the rewards. But besides that, and until that point, you have the dice making a return from the first game. In this one, basically, you have to be the first to reach a certain number. And you also have like dice combinations, so if you have like triplets, quadruplets of the same number, you have increasingly like higher scores. So if you score like 3 or 4 ones in a row, that's going to be a very high score basically. But you have to make sure that you know when you're going to pass your turn or push your luck and keep going, because you can lose all the points and end up a turn with 0 points, even if you almost got like a super high score but did not account for it. So very, very intricate details over there. Also, treasure hunts are really awesome. You get a lot of these treasure maps and you have to find those locations on the map. I really love the treasure hunts. They aren't too obvious, but they can be a bit difficult at times. I did encounter a few of them that even to this day I wasn't able to solve. Also, you have duels, shooting range, both including bow and arrow, but also the new pistols. So yes, pistol is going to be a gun in this game that you can use. And it's going to be appropriate to the era, so it's hard to load, takes a lot of time, it's very imprecise, but if you shoot somebody and hit them, they will get one-shotted through armor. It doesn't matter. That is why, like gunpowder, it was so important back in those times. And besides that, I think you have a few races here and there, but mostly relegated to some side objectives. Like I said, worth it because of the rewards you get out of them. Another topic I want to cover about characters is that some of the face models seem reused. I think that that's because they used actual motion capturing, so they recreated actual actor faces in the game, but sometimes it becomes a bit jarring. Like there were a few occasions where I encountered an NPC with the same face of another character I met and helped maybe like 10-20 hours ago. So I was like, is this the same character? Am I helping them again? Or who the heck is this? So it can definitely be a bit distracting, but it doesn't happen too often, and it's going to mostly pop up after spending at least like 50 hours with the game, when you actually start noticing all the small details as you progress through all types of content and re-see all of those faces again. In terms of romance options, I'm going to say I was surprised by how much action Henry gets in that department. Like there are so many occasions, well, more than a few occasions actually in the main story, when, I don't know, you help a maiden out and yeah, they basically kick it off and they end up having a good time, all in good taste of course. And yeah, the game doesn't shy away from upper body nudity either if you are into that. Or you can also visit, I don't know, bathhouses. It is useful because you get a very strong buff out of it that boosts your stats, so you may still want to visit those from time to time. And I haven't encountered anything that opens up due to a result of a romance, for example. I haven't seen an additional questline opening up just because of that. It's more like if you complete these extra things or help these characters on top of everything you're doing, the conclusion is that eventually you might have an extra romance scene with them. And there's even like a hint of Henry settling down later down the line, but I think that that's also optional. I think that you have to complete some extra objectives for it that I haven't yet fully uncovered. I've also got to say, world building is something else in this game. Now, admittedly, it's not reaching Red Dead Redemption 2 levels of quality, but it's actually getting pretty close. Like, you hear stories from NPCs about some witch or devil man who knows where, then you actually stumble upon such a location accidentally and see why they might think those superstitious, and you get to uncover the truth behind them. One in particular that stood out to me was just a random poem that I heard from some villager who knew about two brothers who died because of a cursed silver axe, and following the clues from that tale, I was able to find the actual real location and see that the axe actually still existed and I could retrieve it. And they will even remember some of these occurrences if you go and talk to them later. Like, for example, I tricked an NPC that himself wanted to trick another NPC and wanted my help for that, and later on some of those NPCs retaliated against him, so obviously when I came back in later, he was angry at me and was about to fight me. Also, I will have to say that in this game, NPCs will absolutely troll and deceive you, and it's one of the things that you have to absolutely pay attention to. I've been sent on so many wild goose chases and fell in so many traps like a noob, and when confronting those same characters again who put me through it, they literally laughed in my face. This is something that the game developers actually added in the game. And that's because of the dialogues that I chose. I could have simply spared myself from all that pain if I was not that gullible, but I really never expected to fall in such obvious traps. And it wasn't just on one occasion. I ended up getting robbed, I lost all of my clothing, I got my drinks spiked with sleeping potions, all because I wasn't paying attention, admittedly in conversations with some very odd characters. Which brings me to the humor. One thing that this game really nails is funny moments. Not to say that it's trying to be overly funny, the overall story can get extremely dark, but in between those times, between those moments of tension, the game really does a great job at breaking that tension with some of these moments of genuine humorous interactions. Say, for example, there's a band of certain individuals that villagers don't really like and want gone, so they ask you to dispose of them. And in the process, you can do that, or you can choose to hear their side, get to befriend them, and in the process, getting drunk out of your mind, singing in Hungarian in the middle of the nighttime in pitch black by the side of a cliff, and only escaping with your life by like the thread of a needle. And there are so many other moments like these that I genuinely stopped and laughed my ass off because they are really capturing that Central and Eastern European humor very, very well. As far as quality of side missions, I will say that for the most part, quite a few of them are really high up there with the main story. Yes, there are still fetch quests and some of them that may have rewards that may not be on par with the time you spend completing them, but I'm gonna say I've seen horrors, I've seen mysteries, I've solved Jack the Ripper style crimes, uncovered conspiracies, all of which were very intriguing. Like the high level ones are very much worth it, and you're going to see a level of quality, like I said, that touches on and maybe even exceeds on occasions that of the main story. I've also got to say that surprisingly, Henry's abilities can come into actual real use during these moments. If you have enough survival skill and your knowledge of alchemy is good enough from brewing potions and whatnot, you can oftentimes treat wounded characters. So you can diagnose their wounds, think of a proper treatment, and if you have crafted bandages or other potions, you can apply those treatments to make them feel better. Otherwise, some of them may even die. But saving them can further help out uncovering new information or making the mission unfold differently, even opening up new sections that weren't possible before. Like one dude I saved once helped me put a good work with the local bailiff so I could free a person of interest that was about to get executed, but that was just one completely random way in which I could do it. In terms of other random encounters, I will have to say that there's quite a lot of them in the open world. Like typically it's getting ambushed or approached by bandits who want to rob you in plain daylight, but every now and then you might encounter some very strange characters, like encountering somebody in need of help, which may open up a completely secret side mission you never knew about that may lead to having to retrieve some very special items that may end up being very strong. Like there's one very cool armor set in the second region that I found this way by total accident. And you can give it back, you can lie that you never found it, or even rob it from the original owner. The list goes on and on. And I already covered how great attention to detail is in this game. It's pretty high up there. I wouldn't say again that it gets close to Red Dead Redemption 2 quality, but I was able to hold conversations just naturally with NPCs because you can react positively or negatively to what they have to say to you, and they have a lot to say to you depending on how you dress, how you look, or how clean or covered in blood you are. In terms of antagonists, some of which you may know from the first game, they give you equally a sense of dread because of the power that they hold and how menacing they look the first time you meet them, or well, meet them again, as well as a sense of anticipation for the resolution that you seek for the conflict between them and Henry. The build up to which is always satisfying, with a great degree of choice on how you choose to handle many of such situations. That's probably because they aren't just unidimensional characters, but instead the game portrays them as actual human beings, not just some extreme individuals. So they might have reasons for their actions that they've committed, be it duty or necessity, but there's also quite a few of them in there that have merely done it just for the sake of cruelty. So it builds up well to the moment you finally have those resolutions. Not always, because like I said, this is still following actual historical events, so it's not like historical events can be changed in this game. Now, combat-wise, I want to talk about one other aspect that I haven't covered before, and that is that even though it can become much better as you unlock those combos and get the master strikes, it's definitely one of the game's biggest limitations in my view, and it's even more apparent in some of the larger scale fights that we get in this game. And I'm just gonna say this, the large scale fights on their own, when you're fighting like big groups of enemies or during big sieges, they feel amazing from an atmospheric point of view. They look stunning, they feel stunning, it's just that the combat takes away a bit of that quality, and specifically because of the way you fight multiple enemies at one given time. It feels a bit clunky at times to quickly switch between targets, so don't expect like God of War level quality here, where you get to juggle between enemies like ping pong balls. That's not going to be the case, because of the slower, more deliberate combat, and because of some of the jankiness. You have to be a bit more careful, otherwise you might end up with some issues. Anyway, I digress. So here is a quick summary of the positives and the negatives. So in terms of the positives, the game obviously feels very immersive, has great character and world building. Choices oftentimes matter a lot. RPG systems are great, plus the game looks and plays very well. In terms of the negatives, combat can feel quite clunky, especially in large-scale fights. Some story decisions were unnecessary, there's reused character models here and there, and generally some of the jankiness just makes some of the encounters or connections annoying. But overall, I would still absolutely recommend Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 because it's such a fun experience and definitely something you can lose yourself into. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.